they have great ideas, because I don't think people are prepared for things if they're going to happen in a few years' time. I think that's kind of one thing that maybe some Taiwanese people could benefit from. I get the feeling that a lot of the things that how they work in Taiwan are actually borrowed from Japan and its time as a colony. But I'm more worried for the Taiwan as a whole. The government looks after the people much more than in other countries. Taiwanese people should really appreciate Taiwan. The thing is, Taiwan doesn't really make the news back in the UK, and I made a discovery. That's kind of a joke for me.
Hi， 大家好，欢迎来 Welcome to Taiwan。我叫拉面。今天我们跑去到新竹跟我们
理查，
我们跟我们英国朋友聊天。So， 影片开始以前，请不要忘记订阅、按赞、开启小铃铛。谢谢大家。
My name is Richard, and I am from the UK, right in the middle, a place very close to Birmingham. And what do I do in Taiwan? Right now, I am a full-time YouTuber.
Why do you choose to come to Taiwan?
Well, I came here a very long time ago, in 1998, and the original purpose was to learn Chinese. But of course, after a while, I started working, and then I met my wife, and I've been here ever since.
You study Chinese in a classroom environment.
Yeah, I started at the language school that was quite popular back then, called TLI, Taipei Language Institute. And I went there instead of Shida because it was closer to my house. And so I was doing 2 hours of class every day. And back then I studied quite a lot at home. And I studied for 2 years solid. And then after that, I figured that my Chinese was at such a level that I could teach myself. And yeah, I mean, you learn from looking at the signs on the, as you drive around, or you're on the bus or whatever, or talking to people,
yeah.
And going home and looking up words that you just heard or you just saw, things like that. So after the first 2 years, self-taught.
Why Taiwan? You could go to other countries to study Chinese. Why Taiwan?
Well, it's quite an interesting story because I was backpacking around Australia and Asia, and I was in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, and I bumped into this American guy who could speak very good Chinese. And he had just come from 2 years in Taiwan, and he was raving about Taiwan, saying what a great place it was, how you could learn Chinese and work at the same time. And ever since I was young, I'd been very interested in Oriental languages like Japanese, Chinese. And so at the time, I had nothing better to do in my life, so I just bought a ticket and came to Taiwan.
Taiwan 26 years ago to Taiwan now. What has changed?
Things are a lot easier to do nowadays, especially regarding things like red tape, getting visas, things like that. That was much more difficult back in the day because the staff at the offices weren't so great at English and the processes weren't so streamlined, so dealing with bureaucracy and things like that is definitely a lot easier nowadays than it was back then.
Coming to Taiwan, how did you settle down? What are some of the difficulties you had to go through to settle down?
Well, I mean, obviously the first difficulty coming here back then was I couldn't speak any Chinese whatsoever. So it was very difficult to do things such as rent a house, rent an apartment, open a bank account, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was really difficult to do that kind of thing back then, especially if you didn't speak any Chinese.
Okay.
I arrived in July, which was probably the worst time of the year to arrive because it was like 38 degrees and I had a huge backpack because I'd been traveling for like 18 months around Asia and Australia. And I got to Taipei main station and I was walking around by the government buildings looking for a hostel called the Happy Family. A lot of older people here in Taiwan will probably remember that hostel because it was basically the only place in Taipei at the time.
Happy Family.
Yeah, so I was walking around Taipei looking for the Happy Family, sweating buckets because it was like 37 degrees. And eventually I found the hostel and yeah. then within 2 days I'd got a job.
Wow, that's so fast.
Yeah, teaching English. Because at the time, the agents would come around to the hostels looking for people fresh off the boat for work. And I didn't have much money at the time and I needed some work. So within 2 days, I was teaching English at a bushiban.
Seems like you have a family here now in Taiwan.
Yeah, I'm married with 2 kids. They're getting older now. My daughter's 18 and my son is 11.
How is it like raising 2 kids here in Taiwan as a foreigner?
It's not too difficult to raise them here, but one of my gripes, I mean, I have a few gripes about Taiwan, but everybody has gripes about wherever they live. Every country's the same. One of my main gripes for my kids is that I don't think it's very easy for them to be accepted here as a Taiwanese because they look more Western than they do Taiwanese, right? Even though they're mixed, right? You know, some kids look more Taiwanese, some kids look more Western. My kids look more Western. They're both fluent in Chinese and very used to the lifestyle here. But whenever they meet people on the street, the people immediately presume they're foreigners, even though they can speak Chinese very well, and they're kids in Taiwan. And probably when they grow older, they won't want to live here because of that reason, even though they are half Taiwanese.
Do you have any suggestion as to how to eradicate this problem?
I think it's pretty difficult to eradicate because I think Taiwanese people are very vision-led. You know, they just see what they say, what they see, and they take things as they look. You know, they don't think beyond that sometimes in some respects. You know, so I think it's very difficult to change that kind of perception amongst people. But I mean, as Taiwan becomes more multicultural, I mean, it already is multicultural when you think about it. There's a lot of foreign brides, but the majority of them are Asian. And for example, if it's a half Vietnamese kid and a half Taiwanese kid, they won't get any problems, right? But just by the way you look, people presume certain things, and it's very difficult to change that perception. The biggest challenge is to be fully accepted as a part of Taiwanese society, because I just think it's very difficult. You know, I speak Chinese, I have local friends, we get on very well, but to the government, you're not really considered Taiwanese, right? You can't vote unless you give up your other passport and take a Taiwanese passport. But I mean, there's no other country in the world, I think, that asks you to do that. You know, you cannot have your original citizenship and take Taiwanese citizenship. I would do that if it was allowed, but to give up my British one, I don't know. It's just something that I'm not willing to do, but I would take Taiwanese citizenship in a flash if it was offered to me, you know. So I think that's a challenge that we can't really achieve on our own. We need help. Yeah, but I don't think that's a very important thing for officials here. They've got so many other things they need to worry about.
Things to worry about.
The immigrant population is not that big, therefore it's not that important.
It's not that important. If you could recall when you first arrived in Taiwan, what did you find strange or unusual?
I guess it's something that still bugs me to this day, is being stared at. I mean, it's even worse when you're walking around with a family, right? And kids pointing at you and things like that. I just think that is very strange for a place that's quite developed, that it hasn't changed as time has passed. Yeah. But apart from that, I dived right into the food. I love the food because it's all these fresh vegetables and great ingredients. Absolutely love the food. But yeah, I mean, being stared at, yeah, because it kind of makes you feel like you're unusual, and I don't think I am.
26 years in Taiwan.
Yeah.
Why did you stay this long?
Well, I mean, the main reason is I got married and we settled down here, and I like living in Taiwan. Where I'm from in the UK, life is pretty dull and boring, you know, whereas in Taiwan there's something happening every day, you know, something interesting. And also from like leisure time. There's so much more to do in Taiwan leisure-wise than where I'm from in the UK. And I just like the lifestyle here. It's very comfortable. The weather is better than the UK. Apart from summer, I don't like summer here, but you know, yeah, I mean, life is very nice here. It's a great place to live, and most foreigners know that. That's why the ones who come here, a lot of them end up staying here because it's such a great place to live.
Taiwan had the independence celebration like last week.
Yeah.
And then recently there's this news that China is circling around Taiwan. Is there any fear? Do you have any concern as a foreigner living in Taiwan with your kids here, with your family?
Well, of course, that's natural. Once you get older and you have kids, you start to worry more about things like that. But right now, I'm not too concerned about it. Obviously, in a few years' time, maybe things will happen, then I'll start worrying about it a bit more. But for now, yeah, I mean, I'm very aware of the situation. I've read a lot about history of Taiwan. I have very strong opinions, which I don't want to go into on this video. But yeah, I mean, of course, in the back of your mind, you're worried. But I'm more worried for the Taiwan as a whole, because I don't think people are prepared for things if they're going to happen in a few years' time. People are just don't seem to be too concerned about it. Obviously, some people are, but not enough people. The thing is, Taiwan doesn't really make the news back in the UK unless there's a big earthquake or, for example, the recent Chinese drills. Then it will. That's the only time it will make the news back in the UK, because I'd say 75% of people back in the UK don't even know where Taiwan is, or they probably never even heard of it. Yeah.
If you are to introduce any British culture to Taiwanese, what British culture would you want to introduce?
That's kind of a joke for me. People could be a bit more tactile, touchy, affectionate to their families, I think. You know, we hug each other a lot, and maybe do the continental cheek kisses in England nowadays. We didn't used to when I was young, but nowadays it's quite a thing. So when I go home to meet my family, I give everybody a hug and kiss. We don't really do that with our family in Taiwan. My wife's family, we get on really well, and we have such a good relationship, but it's not very, you know, touchy-feely kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. I think that's kind of one thing that maybe some Taiwanese people could benefit from.
What part of Taiwanese culture do you find most fascinating? Fascinating,
but very difficult to understand. The temple culture of Taiwan. It's just, you know, I love it, but it's completely crazy and unfathomable. You know, like you have strippers at funerals, and you have these, you know, all these crazy religious ceremonies. It's like a mix of Taoism and Buddhism, and it's just so random. You have crazy temples dedicated to like all kinds of different things, and it's really, really interesting, but it's very difficult to understand unless you study it, I guess. But you know, yeah, I find it really fascinating.
If you are to change anything in Taiwan, then what would it be?
The banking system. You've probably heard that a few times before, but yeah, it's always been the same. Banking systems in the banks in Taiwan. From the times that I've been to Japan, I get the feeling that a lot of the things how they work in Taiwan are actually borrowed from Japan and its time as a colony. And I think the banking system is one of those things. Don't quote me on that, but every time I go in a bank, there's a problem. With tech nowadays and apps and stuff, you don't have to go in there as often, so it's much better, but even the apps are quite unuser-friendly is a nice way to put it. Yeah. Unless, of course, you have good Chinese. I can use Chinese on the apps and stuff because I read and type, but it's not a fun experience to go into a bank in Taiwan. You know, recently they had the new ARC numbers, right? They said, you've got to change your new ARC number because it will make everything better. Yeah. I changed my new ARC number, and then I started getting emails and letters from the bank saying, you need to come in to change like this. And I made a discovery. because I had a few jobs over the years, I have a different bank account with every job, so I had about 5 or 6 bank accounts in Taiwan. I found out that it's easier to close the account than to change the ARC number. Exactly. So basically I closed all my accounts except for one. Yeah. And things are much easier now.
Yeah, I also had the same issue, like going to banks, you have to go to every bank to change your ARC number. And if you have a car, you have to go to all the license departments, the insurance, and it's very hectic.
I haven't actually done my car license yet.
I was like, this is not my decision or my choice to change my number. The government changed that. There should be a way to, make that smooth, that you don't have to take your working time or your other time to go and spend in the banks and other places.
Well, that's another gripe I have about Taiwan is they have great ideas, but then they only implement them in a very, to use the phrase, half-assed way, They implement a scheme, but it's not done perfectly, and then they just move on to something else and forget about it. And yeah, the ARC number thing is a perfect example.
Yeah.
But I'm not griping too much. I still like Taiwan.
Do you have anything else to tell Taiwanese people?
Taiwanese people should really appreciate Taiwan as a great place because a lot of people, although everybody does it, I think if you live in a country, you tend to pick faults with it and say, oh, this is bad, that's bad. Everybody does it in every country, but in Taiwan, you hear people talking about how bad this is, how bad that is.
You mean Taiwanese? Or?
Yeah, Taiwanese people, they're talking about, how bad the government is and how bad this and that is. But when you compare it to other places, I mean, I've lived in 3 or 4 countries now. I lived in Singapore, I lived in Australia, lived in the UK, and honestly, Taiwan is doing pretty well. It's doing a good job. The government looks after the people much more than in other countries, and you should be grateful for that. Don't complain so much.
All right, thank you very much for taking your time and sharing your wisdom about
wisdom.
Yeah,
okay.
And hope you continue to prosper here in Taiwan.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Thank you very much for watching and hope you enjoyed this video. If you like the video, please don't forget to click the subscription button, like the video, and share if you can. And thank you for watching.